Sarah Martinez never imagined that her morning jog would lead to the most terrifying and heroic moment of her life. The 28-year-old nurse had always been drawn to helping others, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened. On that crisp October morning in downtown San Diego, she was running her usual route, along the harbor when the explosion shattered the peaceful morning silence. The blast came from a construction site 3 blocks away, sending debris flying through the air like deadly confetti. Sarah's nursing instincts kicked in immediately as she heard the screams and saw the thick black smoke rising into the sky. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward the chaos. The scene that greeted her was like something from a war zone. A gas leak had caused a massive explosion in the basement of a building under renovation. Construction workers were scattered across the ground, some conscious and crying for help, others lying motionlessly in pools of blood. Sarah quickly assessed the situation, her medical training taking over despite the fear coursing through her veins. She began moving from person to person, checking pulses and applying pressure to wounds with torn pieces of her own clothing. The acrid smell of smoke and gas filled her lungs, making every breath a struggle. That's when she heard it, a weak voice calling for help from inside the partially collapsed building. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay outside, Sarah grabbed a flashlight from a nearby emergency kit and made her way through the unstable structure. The voice belonged to Marcus Thompson, a 25-year-old Marine on leave who had been visiting his father at the construction site. Marcus was trapped under a heavy beam, his leg clearly broken and bleeding heavily. His face was pale, and Sarah could see he was going into shock. The building groaned ominously around them, and she knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, before the entire structure came down. "I'm Sarah. I'm a nurse," she told Marcus, her voice calm despite the chaos. "I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay with me, okay?" Marcus nodded weakly, his eyes focusing on her with a mixture of pain and hope. Sarah knew she couldn't lift the beam alone, but she also knew that help might not arrive in time. The sound of sirens grew closer, but the building was becoming more unstable with each passing moment. She made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Using a piece of rebar as a lever, she managed to shift the beam just enough to pull Marcus free. But as soon as she moved him, she realized the full extent of his injuries. His leg was badly mangled and he was losing blood fast. "Listen to me," Sarah said, looking directly into Marcus's eyes. "I'm going to carry you out of here. You're going to make it home to your family, I promise." The building shuddered again and chunks of concrete began falling around them. Sarah knew she had to act now or they would both die in the collapse. She positioned herself to lift Marcus, drawing on every ounce of strength she had ever possessed. As she hoisted the injured Marine onto her back, Sarah felt her knees buckle under his weight. Marcus was 6 feet tall and weighed nearly 200 pounds, while Sarah was barely 5'4" and weighed half that. But determination and adrenaline gave her strength she never knew she had. Step by agonizing step, she carried Marcus through the crumbling building. Her back screamed in protest, her legs trembled with exhaustion, and her lungs burned from the smoke and dust. Behind them, she could hear the building beginning its final collapse. The exit seemed impossibly far away, but Sarah refused to give up. Marcus had grown quiet on her back, and she feared he might be losing consciousness. "Stay with me, Marine," she gasped. "We're almost there." Just as they reached the doorway, Sarah felt her strength give out completely. Her legs collapsed beneath her, and she tumbled forward, using her body to cushion Marcus's fall as they both crashed to the ground outside the building. Seconds later, the entire structure came down in a thunderous roar of twisted metal and concrete. Emergency responders rushed to their aid, but Sarah was barely conscious. The last thing she remembered was seeing Marcus being loaded into an ambulance, alive and breathing, before everything went black. When Sarah slowly opened her eyes, the first thing she noticed was the steady beeping of medical equipment. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room made her squint as she tried to focus on her surroundings. Her entire body felt like she had been hit by a truck, and every small movement sent waves of pain through her muscles. A kind-faced doctor approached her bed, his expression mixing concern with admiration. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Dr. Patterson. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. How are you feeling?" Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was raw from smoke inhalation. The doctor quickly provided her with ice chips, which she gratefully accepted. "The Marine," she finally managed to croak. "Is he okay?" Dr. Patterson smiled. "Marcus Thompson is alive because of you. He's in surgery right now, but his prognosis is good. You saved his life, Sarah. However, we need to talk about your injuries. The doctor explained that Sarah had suffered severe muscle strain in her back and legs, smoke inhalation and exhaustion that had pushed her body beyond its limits. While nothing was permanently damaged, she would need several weeks of recovery and physical therapy. You carried a man nearly twice your size out of a collapsing building, Dr. Patterson said, shaking his head in amazement. The paramedics said it was physically impossible, yet here we are. Over the next few days, word of Sarah's heroic act began to spread. It started with a brief mention in the local news, but the story quickly gained traction across social media and national news outlets. Reporters called her room constantly, wanting interviews, but Sarah repeatedly declined. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had simply done what anyone would have done. Her family arrived from various parts of the country. Her mother, Maria, couldn't stop crying as she held Sarah's hand. "Mija, you could have died," she whispered. "Why did you go into that building?" Sarah struggled to explain the compulsion she had felt. "I heard him calling for help, Mama. I couldn't just leave him there." Her father, a retired firefighter, understood better than anyone. "You have your grandfather's heart," he told her. He would have done the same thing. On the third day, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Thompson appeared in her doorway, supported by crutches and accompanied by a stern-looking man in a military uniform. Despite his pale complexion and obvious pain, Marcus's eyes were bright with emotion. "I had to come see you," Marcus said, slowly making his way to her bedside. "The doctors told me what you did. You risked your life for a complete stranger." The man in uniform stepped forward and introduced himself as Colonel James Harrison, Marcus's commanding officer. "Miss Martinez, what you did goes beyond civilian heroism. You displayed the kind of courage and selflessness that we strive to instill in our Marines." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the attention. "I just did what felt right," she insisted. "Anyone would have done the same thing." Marcus shook his head firmly. "No, they wouldn't have. Most people would have waited for help. You went into a collapsing building and carried me out with your bare hands. You saved my life." As they talked, Sarah learned more about Marcus. He was from a small town in Ohio, had joined the Marines after high school, and had served 2 tours overseas. He was visiting his father, who worked at the construction site when the accident happened. His father had been on the upper floors and had escaped with minor injuries. "My dad told me about you before I even woke up," Marcus said. "He saw you go into that building. He said you moved like you had a guardian angel giving you strength." Colonel Harrison pulled out his phone and showed Sarah something that made her eyes widen in surprise. The video, taken by a bystander, showed her emerging from the building with Marcus on her back, stumbling and falling just as the structure collapsed behind them. "This video has been viewed millions of times," the colonel said. "People are calling you the Angel of San Diego. You've inspired countless people with your bravery." Sarah watched the video in silence, hardly recognizing the small figure carrying the much larger man. She could see her own desperation and determination in every step, but also something else, a strength she didn't know she possessed. Marcus reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what you did for me." That evening, after her visitors had left, Sarah stared out the window at the city lights. She thought about how quickly life could change, how one moment of decision could alter everything. She had gone for a simple morning jog and ended up becoming someone she barely recognized, someone the world was calling a hero. After a week in the hospital, Sarah was finally cleared to go home, though she still moved slowly and carefully. The media attention had only intensified during her recovery, and the hospital staff had to create a special exit strategy to help her avoid the crowd of reporters waiting outside. Her small apartment in the Hillcrest neighborhood felt strange after everything that had happened. The familiar surroundings seemed to belong to a different person, the Sarah who existed before the explosion. She looked at her nursing scrubs hanging in the closet, wondering if she would ever feel normal again. The stack of letters and packages on her kitchen table was overwhelming. People from around the world had sent her messages of support, gratitude, and admiration. Children had drawn pictures of her carrying Marcus to safety. Veterans had written to thank her for helping one of their own. Complete strangers had sent flowers, gift cards, and even checks to help with her medical expenses. One letter stood out from the rest. The return address showed it was from Marcus's mother in Ohio. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope and read the heartfelt words written in careful handwriting. Dear Sarah, I don't have the words to express what you mean to our family. Marcus is our only child, and when we got the call about the accident, we thought we had lost him. Then we heard about you, an angel who appeared when we needed a miracle most. You gave us our son back. You gave me my baby back. I will pray for you every day for the rest of my life. With all my love and gratitude, Linda Thompson. Sarah had to stop reading as tears blurred her vision. She had been so focused on the physical aspects of the rescue that she hadn't fully considered the emotional impact on the families involved. Marcus wasn't just a stranger she had helped. He was someone's son, someone's everything. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests, but Sarah continued to decline most of them. She did agree to one phone interview with a local radio station, hoping to redirect attention to the first responders who had arrived after the rescue. I want people to understand that I was just one person who happened to be there, she told the radio host. The real heroes were the firefighters, paramedics, and police officers who saved everyone else at that scene. They risk their lives every day to protect our community. But even her attempts to deflect attention seemed to make people admire her more. Social media was filled with posts praising her humility and selflessness. A hashtag, Your Angel of San Diego, was trending nationally. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, Sarah returned to work at the Scripps Mercy Hospital Emergency Department. Her colleagues greeted her with a banner and applause, but she felt embarrassed by the attention. She just wanted to get back to her normal routine of helping patients. However, normal was no longer possible. Patients and their families recognized her constantly, and some requested her specifically for their care. Her supervisor, Janet, pulled her aside during her first shift back. Sarah, I need you to know that we're incredibly proud of you, Janet said, but I also need to make sure you're ready for this. The attention isn't going to go away anytime soon. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure she was ready for anything. The incident had changed her in ways she was still trying to understand. She found herself looking at every emergency situation differently, wondering if she should do more, risk more, save more people. During her lunch break, she received a text message from an unknown number. When she opened it, she saw it was from Marcus. He had gotten her number from the hospital and wanted to update her on his recovery. Physical therapy is brutal, but the doctors say I'll make a full recovery, the message read. I start my new assignment at Camp Pendleton next month. I was wondering if you might want to meet for coffee sometime. I'd like to thank you properly. Sarah stared at the message for a long time before responding. Part of her wanted to maintain distance from the whole experience, to try to move on and forget about that terrifying morning. But another part of her felt connected to Marcus in a way she couldn't explain. I'd like that, she finally typed back. They arranged to meet the following weekend at a quiet cafe near the harbor. Sarah was nervous as she walked to the meeting, not sure what to expect. She found Marcus already seated at a corner table, looking much healthier than when she had last seen him in the hospital. When he stood to greet her, Sarah was struck by how tall and imposing he was. It seemed impossible that she had carried this strong, capable man to safety. Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. I keep thinking the same thing, he said with a slight smile. The doctors showed me the math. Given our size difference and your physical condition, what you did was scientifically improbable. They talked for hours about everything except the rescue. Sarah learned that Marcus loved photography, had studied engineering before joining the Marines, and missed his family terribly when deployed. Marcus discovered that Sarah had originally wanted to be a doctor but chose nursing to start helping people sooner. I have something for you, Marcus said as they prepared to leave. He pulled out a small wrapped package and handed it to her. Inside was a silver necklace with a simple pendant, the Marine Corps eagle, globe, and anchor emblem. It belonged to my grandfather, Marcus explained. He was a Marine in World War II. My mom wanted you to have it. Sarah felt tears welling up again. Marcus, I can't accept this. It's too precious, please, Marcus said quietly. You're part of our family now, whether you like it or not. You saved my life, and that creates a bond that can't be broken. As Sarah drove home that evening, she wore the necklace and thought about bonds and family and the unexpected ways life connected people. She was beginning to understand that she couldn't just return to her old life. The experience had changed her, and perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. 3 months had passed since the accident, and Sarah had finally begun to feel like her life was returning to some version of normal. The media attention had died down, though she still occasionally received letters from people who had been inspired by her story. Her friendship with Marcus had grown stronger as they met regularly for coffee and supported each other through their respective recoveries. On a quiet Thursday morning in January, Sarah was working her shift in the emergency department when she received a call that would once again turn her world upside down. The caller identified himself as Sergeant Major William Rodriguez from Camp Pendleton. "Ms. Martinez, I'm calling on behalf of Colonel Harrison in the 2nd Marine Division," he said in a crisp, professional tone. "We would like to invite you to participate in a special ceremony honoring your heroic actions." Sarah's heart began racing. "What kind of ceremony?" "The Marine Corps has decided to present you with the Civilian Award for Heroic Action," Sergeant Major Rodriguez explained. "It's one of our highest honors for civilian bravery. The ceremony will take place at Camp Pendleton in 2 weeks, and we expect approximately 500 Marines to be in attendance." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. 500 Marines? I don't understand. Why such a big ceremony? "Ms. Martinez, your story has spread throughout the Corps. Marines from across the country have requested permission to attend this ceremony. Your actions embody the values we hold sacred: honor, courage, and commitment. You risked your life to save one of our own, and the Corps wants to recognize that sacrifice properly." After she hung up, Sarah sat in stunned silence. The idea of standing in front of 500 Marines was terrifying. She had spent months trying to downplay her actions, insisting she wasn't a hero, and now the military was planning to honor her in front of hundreds of people. When she called Marcus to tell him about the invitation, his excitement was immediate and infectious. "Sarah, this is incredible. Do you understand what this means? The Marine Corps doesn't give out awards lightly. They're recognizing you as one of their own." "But I'm not one of them," Sarah protested. "I'm just a nurse who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You're someone who displayed Marine values without ever being trained as a Marine. That's what makes this so special." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah tried to prepare herself mentally for the ceremony. She had never been to a military base, never been around so many service members at once. The thought of being the center of attention for 500 Marines was overwhelming. The night before the ceremony, she barely slept. She kept thinking about all the ways she might embarrass herself or say the wrong thing. She had practiced a short speech dozens of times, but the words seemed to disappear from her mind every time she imagined standing at a podium. Marcus picked her up early on the morning of the ceremony. He was wearing his dress blue uniform, looking every inch the Marine she had saved months earlier. His leg had healed completely and he was back to full duty. "You look terrified," Marcus observed as they drove toward Camp Pendleton. "I am terrified," Sarah admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I say something wrong?" "You won't," Marcus said confidently. "Just be yourself. That's the person who saved my life, and that's the person these Marines want to honor." When they arrived at the base, Sarah was amazed by the scale of the preparation. A large parade ground had been set up with a stage, flags, and rows upon rows of chairs. Marines in dress uniforms were already beginning to assemble, their precision and discipline evident in every movement. Colonel Harrison greeted Sarah personally, thanking her again for her heroism and explaining how the ceremony would proceed. "Ms. Martinez, I want you to know that this ceremony is as much for the Marines as it is for you. Your story has reminded our troops why they serve, to protect others, even at personal cost." As the ceremony began, Sarah found herself standing on the stage looking out at an ocean of Marines in their dress blue uniforms. The sight was both beautiful and intimidating. These were men and women who had chosen to dedicate their lives to serving their country, and somehow they were honoring her. Colonel Harrison's introduction was longer and more detailed than Sarah had expected. He recounted the events of that October morning, describing her actions in terms that made her sound like someone she barely recognized. He spoke about courage under fire, selfless service, and the warrior spirit that transcended military training. "Ladies and gentlemen," the colonel concluded, "it is my honor to present the Civilian Award for Heroic Action to Ms. Sarah Martinez, a woman who proved that heroism is not defined by the uniform you wear, but by the choices you make when others are in need." As Sarah stepped forward to receive the award, something unexpected happened. Without any command or signal, The 500 Marines rose to their feet in perfect unison and began applauding. The sound was thunderous, echoing across the parade ground like a rolling wave. But then something even more remarkable occurred. One Marine in the front row began to clap more slowly and deliberately. Others joined him, and within moments the entire assembly was giving Sarah a slow, rhythmic standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she looked out at these brave men and women honoring her. She thought about that morning when she had simply tried to help someone in need, never imagining it would lead to this moment. When she finally stepped to the microphone to give her speech, her prepared words seemed inadequate. Instead, she spoke from her heart. I stand before you today not as a hero, but as someone who was reminded that we all have the capacity for courage when it matters most, she began. Marcus Thompson could have been anyone's son, brother, or father. In that moment, he was simply someone who needed help, and I was someone who could provide it. The ceremony concluded with the Marines once again rising in unison, this time rendering a formal salute to Sarah. As she looked out at those 500 faces, she realized that she had indeed been changed by her experience, not just by the rescue itself, but by understanding the profound impact one moment of courage could have on so many lives. The ceremony at Camp Pendleton marked the beginning of a new chapter in Sarah's life that she never could have anticipated. Videos and photographs from the event spread quickly across social media and news outlets, showing the moment when 500 Marines rose to honor a small nurse from San Diego. The image of Sarah standing on the stage, overwhelmed by emotion as uniformed Marines saluted her, became iconic. In the weeks following the ceremony, Sarah began receiving invitations she never would have imagined. Schools wanted her to speak to students about courage and selflessness. Hospitals invited her to address their staff about going above and beyond. Military families reached out, asking her to attend their own ceremonies and celebrations. At first, Sarah was reluctant to accept these speaking engagements. She still struggled with being called a hero and felt uncomfortable with the attention, but Marcus, who had become one of her closest friends, convinced her that her story could inspire others. You have no idea how many people need to hear what you have to say, he told her over coffee one morning. I get messages from Marines all over the world who say your story reminded them why they serve. But it's not just military people, it's teachers, firefighters, doctors, regular people who are inspired to be better. Sarah's first speaking engagement was at Marcus's old high school in Ohio. She was nervous about traveling so far from home, but Marcus's family welcomed her like she was their own daughter. His parents, Linda and Robert Thompson, had driven 3 hours to attend her speech. The high school auditorium was packed with teenagers who seemed skeptical about hearing from another adult, telling them to make good choices. But when Sarah began telling her story, something shifted in the room. She didn't lecture them about heroism or courage. Instead, she talked about fear, about the moment when she heard Marcus calling for help and had to choose between staying safe and risking everything for a stranger. I was terrified, she told the students honestly. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, and every instinct I had was telling me to wait for help. But sometimes the right choice isn't the safe choice. After her speech, a shy teenage girl approached her with tears in her eyes. My mom is a single parent and she works 2 jobs to take care of me and my little brother, the girl said. Sometimes I think about quitting school to get a job and help her. But listening to you made me realize that the brave thing might be to stay in school and work toward a future where I can help her more. Stories like this began happening everywhere Sarah spoke. A young paramedic in Phoenix wrote to tell her that her story inspired him to take additional training in rescue techniques. A teacher in Denver said she started a program at her school called Everyday Heroes, where students looked for opportunities to help others in small but meaningful ways, perhaps the most unexpected. Development was Sarah's growing relationship with the military community. She began visiting wounded veterans at VA hospitals, not as part of any official program, but simply because she had developed a deep appreciation for their service and sacrifice. During one visit to the VA hospital in Los Angeles, she met Corporal Jennifer Hayes, a female Marine who had lost her leg in an IED explosion overseas. Jennifer was struggling with depression and had been resistant to physical therapy. What's the point of learning to walk again? Jennifer asked Sarah bitterly. I'm not the Marine I used to be. I can't serve my country anymore. Sarah sat quietly for a moment before responding. You know, I used to think heroism was about being fearless and strong, but I've learned that real courage is about continuing to fight even when you're broken, even when you're scared, even when you can't see the purpose. She visited Jennifer every week for 3 months, and slowly the Marine began to open up about her struggles and fears. Jennifer eventually not only completed her physical therapy, but went on to become a counselor for other wounded veterans. Sarah didn't just save Marcus that day, Jennifer later said in an interview. She saved me too, just in a different way. The ripple effects of Sarah's story continued to spread in unexpected directions. A construction company in Texas implemented new safety protocols after their workers watched the video of the building collapse. A nursing school in Florida created a scholarship in Sarah's name for students who demonstrated exceptional commitment to helping others. But perhaps the most meaningful impact was on Sarah herself. Through her speaking engagements and visits with veterans, she discovered a calling she never knew she had. She began studying emergency medicine more seriously, taking additional courses in trauma care and disaster response. I used to think my job was to take care of patients who came to the hospital, she explained to Marcus during one of their regular coffee meetings. But now I understand that sometimes you have to go where the need is, even if it's dangerous. Marcus smiled at her words. You sound like you're thinking about becoming a first responder. Sarah nodded slowly. I've been accepted to the paramedic program at the community college. It's something I never would have considered before, but now I can't imagine not doing it. As they walked along the harbor where Sarah had been jogging that fateful October morning, Marcus reflected on how profoundly both their lives had changed. You know, I used to think that day was about you saving my life, he said. But I think maybe we saved each other. Sarah looked out at the water and thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. A single moment of choosing courage over comfort had transformed not just her own life but the lives of countless people she had met along the way. She was beginning to understand that heroism wasn't about one dramatic act. It was about choosing to help others again and again, in whatever way you could. 2 years after that life-changing October morning, Sarah stood in the same emergency bay where she had once worked as a hospital nurse, but now she wore the uniform of a paramedic, and her ambulance was parked outside ready for whatever emergency might come next. The transition from hospital nursing to emergency medical services had been challenging, but every day reinforced her decision to take her calling to where people needed help most. Her partner, Jake Morrison, was a veteran paramedic who had initially been skeptical about working with someone he called the famous nurse. But Sarah had quickly proven herself through her skill, dedication, and unwavering calm under pressure. Jake now frequently told people that Sarah was the best partner he'd ever had. We've got a call, Jake announced as their radio crackled to life. Multi-vehicle accident on the interstate, possible entrapment. As they raced toward the scene, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline mixed with focused determination. These moments no longer scared her the way they once had. Her experience carrying Marcus from that collapsing building had taught her that she was capable of more than she ever imagined. The accident scene was chaotic. 3 cars involved, 1 overturned and traffic backed up for miles. Sarah and Jake immediately began assessing the situation, working with the fire department to extract victims and provide emergency care. In the overturned vehicle, Sarah found a young woman trapped and unconscious with what appeared to be serious head trauma. The car was unstable, rocking slightly with every movement, and gasoline was leaking from the tank. The fire chief approached her with concern in his eyes. We need to get her out fast, but the car could shift at any moment, he warned. It's too dangerous to use our normal extraction equipment. Sarah looked at the trapped woman and felt a familiar determination rise within her. I can get to her, she said quietly. I'm small enough to fit through that window opening. Jake shook his head immediately. Sarah, that's not protocol. We wait for the heavy rescue team. She doesn't have time to wait, Sarah replied, already moving toward the vehicle. Her pupils are unequal. She's got increasing brain pressure. 5 more minutes could be the difference between life and death. Against protocol but trusting his partner's judgment, Jake helped secure Sarah with a safety line as she carefully crawled through the shattered window into the overturned car. Working in the cramped, upside-down space, she quickly assessed the woman's injuries and began providing life-saving care. I've got a pulse. But it's weak, Sarah called out to Jake. I need you to have the trauma team ready for immediate surgery. As she worked to stabilize the victim's neck and prepare her for extraction, Sarah noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. On the woman's purse, barely visible in the wreckage, was a military ID card. This was Sarah Chen. No relation, just the coincidence of sharing a first name. A Marine corporal home on Nao, leave from overseas deployment. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah, as she carefully guided the unconscious Marine through the window opening to waiting firefighters. Once again, she found herself helping save a Marine's life, though this time as part of her job rather than as a bystander who happened to be in the right place at the right time. At the hospital, Sarah learned that Corporal Chen would make a full recovery thanks to the rapid response and care she had received at the scene. The attending physician specifically praised Sarah's decision to enter the unstable vehicle, noting that the delay would likely have resulted in permanent brain damage or death. Later that evening, as Sarah was finishing her shift, she received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Thompson appeared in the ambulance bay, now wearing the bars of a lieutenant and looking every inch the confident Marine officer he had become. "I heard about today," Marcus said with a proud smile. "Jake called me to tell me what you did. He said you crawled into an overturned car to save someone." Sarah shrugged, still uncomfortable with praise even after all this time. "It's what we do. It's what anyone would do." "No," Marcus said firmly. "It's what you do. It's who you are." They walked together to the same harbor where Sarah had been jogging 2 years earlier. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. As they sat on a bench overlooking the scene, Marcus shared news that would bring Sarah's journey full circle. "The Marine Corps is creating a new award," he told her. "It's called the Sarah Martinez Award for Civilian Heroism, and it will be given annually to civilians who demonstrate extraordinary courage in helping military personnel." Sarah was speechless. The idea that her name would be associated with an award honoring other heroes seemed surreal and humbling beyond words. "There's more," Marcus continued. "They want you to be present every year when the award is given. They want you to meet the recipients and tell them your story." As they talked, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple morning jog. She had started as someone who helped people within the safe confines of a hospital, and had become someone who actively sought out opportunities to help others, even when it meant taking risks. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer Hayes, the wounded Marine veteran she had befriended. Jennifer had just graduated from her counseling program and was starting work at a new veterans center. "Thinking of you today," the message read. "Another Marine saved because you showed us all what courage looks like." The letters and messages still came regularly from people whose lives had been touched by her story. Teachers who had started programs to encourage students to help others. First responders who had taken additional training. Regular people who had simply decided to be a little braver in their daily lives. As Marcus walked her back to her car, Sarah looked up at the building where the original accident had occurred. Construction was nearly complete on the new structure that had risen from the rubble of the collapsed building. A small plaque near the entrance caught her eye. It was a memorial to the workers who had been injured that day, with a special note thanking the civilian heroes who risked everything to save others. "You know what I've learned?" Sarah said to Marcus as they said goodbye. "That day didn't make me a hero. It just showed me that I already was one. We all are. We just have to choose to act when the moment comes." Driving home that night, Sarah thought about tomorrow's shift, about the calls that would come, and about the people she might be able to help. She no longer saw herself as someone who had done one heroic thing, but as someone who had learned that heroism was a choice you could make every single day. The Angel of San Diego had discovered that the most important thing about having wings was using them to lift others up. And she planned to keep flying for as long as people needed help finding their way to safety.